She didn't flinch when the first crack of gunfire split the night. But the silence before it, those heavy seconds of waiting, cut deeper than the bullet's echo. Her hands tightened around the cold steel of the rifle, knuckles whitening beneath dirt and blood, breath trapped somewhere between lungs and throat. She could feel her heart pounding, not for flag, not for anthem, but for something smaller, something no one else here would ever understand. She had promised herself she wouldn't break again, not tonight. The desert stretched ahead, painted in moonlight, vast and merciless. Every shadow looked like an enemy. Every gust of wind whispered of danger. The men around her shifted, restless, but she stayed still. Stillness had become her armor. It was easier than speaking, easier than explaining. They called her quiet. Some meant it with respect, others with suspicion. But they didn't know that silence was the only way she could keep herself from shattering. She remembered the last time she had spoken too much. The weight of her words had gotten someone killed. Now she carried it, the silence, the guilt, the heartbeat of survival. A hand tapped her shoulder. Ramirez, young, reckless, too eager to prove himself. His eyes flickered toward her rifle, then toward the horizon. "You see something," he whispered. She shook her head once. No, but that wasn't the truth. She had seen something. A flicker of movement in the ridge line, too smooth to be the wind, too steady to be chance. She didn't answer him, not yet, not until she was certain. Because certainty meant lives. She lifted her cheek from the stock of the rifle, gaze narrowing. The faintest gleam of glass caught the moonlight. A scope. Someone was watching them. Her breath stilled, her heart didn't. Ramirez was about to say something else, but she raised her hand, just a single finger to her lips. He froze. She could feel his confusion, his question hanging in the air, but her focus was already locked elsewhere. Why had they been allowed to reach this far without contact? Why here, in the open ground where retreat was suicide and cover was scarce? She thought of the briefing table, the way the senior officers had looked through her, past her, as if her presence was a mistake someone had forgotten to correct. She'd drawn the map, traced the routes, explained the risks. She knew the terrain better than anyone, but when it came to decisions, their eyes slid to someone else. She didn't argue, not then, not ever. But inside she had known, the ambush wasn't a matter of if, it was only when. And now here it was. Her finger slid against the trigger, slow, controlled, breath measured. She saw the faintest silhouette of a head above the ridge, just enough. She squeezed. The sound was sharp, but her silence after was sharper. A body crumpled in the distance, tumbling out of sight. Then came the return fire, like thunder breaking open the night. Ramirez cursed, scrambling for cover. The rest of the unit dropped low, weapons up, scanning. But it was her shot that had given them a chance. The air filled with dirt and fire, bullets tearing through sandbags and stone. She felt the sting of grit against her cheek, the hiss of rounds just inches from flesh. Fear tried to claw its way into her chest. She swallowed it. Because fear was useless here. Her rifle was an extension of her heartbeat now, each breath syncing with the rhythm of survival. One target down, another moving, another breath, another squeeze. She remembered her father's voice, rough, distant, always commanding. Don't miss. You don't get a second chance in this world. Back then, she thought he was talking about hunting deer in the woods behind their house. She hadn't known he was preparing her for this. For deserts where no flag flew, no anthem played, and the only song was the rattle of death. She wished she hated him for it, but part of her was grateful. The firefight stretched into minutes that felt like hours. Sand stung her eyes, sweat burned her skin, and yet she didn't move from her post. Not until the gunfire slowed. Not until the echoes of retreating boots began to fade. Then silence again, heavy, crushing. Ramirez exhaled shakily, his helmet tilted toward her. You saved us." She didn't answer. She couldn't. The words would have caught in her throat. Instead, she reloaded her rifle with calm, steady hands. Because she knew better, this wasn't over. That ridge wasn't chosen by chance. Someone had planned this. Someone had waited for them, and someone out there still wanted them dead. The others started to gather themselves, brushing off dust, counting heads. 2 wounded, none dead, a miracle, they said. But she didn't believe in miracles. She believed in silence, in patience, in pain carried alone. Her eyes drifted back to the horizon, to the ridge where the body had fallen. The others looked relieved, even proud, but she felt only the familiar weight settling back on her chest. Because she knew something they didn't. That wasn't the last time tonight they'd be hunted. And she hadn't told them the most important thing yet. The mission wasn't just survival. For her, it was personal. What made her keep secrets from the people who trusted her with their lives? That question echoed in her own mind as she sat in the dirt, rifle across her lap, listening to the ragged breaths of the wounded. She wrapped a bandage around Ramirez's arm, tight, efficient, without looking at his face. He tried to break the silence anyway. You knew it was coming, didn't you? She paused, fingers pressing gauze against torn flesh. His voice wasn't accusing, just curious, searching. She didn't answer. Instead, she tied off the cloth, gave a single nod, and stood. Her shadow stretched long under the pale glow of the moon. Ramirez let out a humorless chuckle. You don't talk much, but you see everything. He wasn't wrong, she did see everything, and sometimes she wished she didn't. The ridge line was quiet now, but too quiet. No retreating fighters, no second wave, no pursuit. Just silence that pressed against her ears, heavy and unnatural. She scanned the horizon, eyes narrowing. Something about it didn't sit right. The unit regrouped. Sergeant Holt, their grizzled team leader, spat into the sand. We'll move at first light. No use stumbling blind into another trap. She wanted to object. She wanted to say, we don't have until dawn. They'll circle back before then. But the words didn't leave her lips. Because she wasn't sure how much Holt trusted her. He had never said it aloud, but she felt it in his eyes, the same look others had given her before. A look that said, you don't belong here. You're here because someone made a mistake. He didn't know the truth. None of them did. She adjusted the strap of her pack and walked a short distance away, scanning again through her scope. The moonlight revealed traces in the sand, prints, dragged equipment, patterns that spoke of discipline. Whoever they were up against, they weren't amateurs. Her chest tightened. She recognized the signatures in those tracks. And that was the secret she carried. Because years ago, before she wore this uniform, before she earned her place in silence, she had seen those same patterns in another war, another battlefield, and the people who made them were ghosts she had hoped never to face again. The memories came unbidden. Rain-slick streets in a foreign city, the smell of burning tires, a rooftop, a scope, and a voice in her ear telling her to take the shot. She had taken it, and the man who fell had been the wrong one. Collateral, they had called him. Civilian. Father. Her bullet had carved a hole not just in him, but in her own soul. She had been pulled from that mission, scrubbed from reports, reassigned under silence. Officially, it never happened, but in her heart, it never stopped happening. And the fighters she'd seen tonight, they carried the same discipline, the same training, as the ones who had been there that day. Which meant the past wasn't buried, it was coming back for her. She blinked the memory away and lowered the scope. Her hands trembled, just for a second, before she clenched them into fists. Not here, not now, not in front of them. The team set perimeter watches, each soldier rotating in pairs. She volunteered for the longest shift. No one argued. They knew she wouldn't sleep anyway. As the hours dragged, she listened to the quiet. The wounded moaned occasionally, Holt muttered in his dreams, and Ramirez whispered prayers to a God she wasn't sure he believed in. She envied him for that. Faith, even when fractured, was lighter to carry than silence. She watched the horizon, waiting, listening, breathing. And then she saw it. A flicker of movement at the edge of the dunes. barely there, a shadow crossing the sand where no shadow should have been. Her pulse quickened. She raised her rifle again, but this time she didn't fire. She tracked, she studied. There were more of them than she'd thought. 10, maybe 12, moving with precision, splitting into flanking arcs, surrounding. Her jaw tightened. She turned her head toward the sleeping team, her mouth opening to speak. But then hesitation. Because she knew what would happen. If she woke Holt, if she told him what she saw, he'd question her. He'd doubt her. He might even call it nerves, paranoia. And if she was wrong, even for a second. Her finger hovered near the trigger. She thought of the man she had killed by mistake. The moment she had spoken up then, trusted her instinct, and been wrong. One life lost, an entire mission compromised. Her silence after had been her punishment. But this wasn't then, this was now, and the shadows were real. Her throat burned as she forced the words out, low but sharp. Contact. The team jolted awake instantly. Holt cursed, grabbing his rifle. Ramirez winced as he pushed himself up, injured arm clutched against his chest. They didn't question her this time, not when they saw the dark shapes cresting the ridge. Gunfire erupted, the night tore open again. She dropped too quickly, the recoil steady against her shoulder. The others scattered, returning fire, moving faster than most enemies should. Holt barked orders, his voice cracking with urgency. Ramirez slid in beside her, breathing hard. How the hell did you spot them? Her eyes never left the scope. I didn't blink. He laughed, even as bullets screamed overhead. Remind me never to play cards against you. The firefight raged. Dirt exploded around them, tracer rounds slicing the dark. She shifted positions, found angles, and kept firing. Each pull of the trigger was a heartbeat, each heartbeat another second of life for her team. And yet beneath the chaos she felt it, a strange calm, a rhythm. Her heart was a battlefield, yes, but tonight it wasn't breaking. Tonight it was fighting. The enemy pressed closer, but they weren't reckless. They were testing, probing, adjusting. Whoever led them was smart, patient, dangerous. When dawn finally bled across the horizon, the attackers pulled back, melting into the dunes like ghosts. The battlefield fell silent again, littered with empty casings and blood-soaked bandages. Holt wiped sweat and sand from his brow, his eyes locked on her. For the first time there was no doubt in them, only something heavier, something closer to respect. You saved our asses, he muttered. She didn't smile, she didn't nod. She just cleaned her rifle, her hands steady despite the tremor in her chest. Because respect didn't erase the past, and she knew this fight wasn't over. As the sun climbed higher, Holt gathered the team. We're moving. Whoever these bastards are, they're not stopping until we're gone, and I don't plan on giving them the chance. The others nodded, weary but alive. Ramirez grinned at her, though his lips were pale from blood loss. Guess we're following you now. The words twisted in her gut, because that was the part they didn't understand. She wasn't afraid of leading them into danger. She was afraid of leading them into her past. And the deeper they went, the closer that past was coming. Why did the enemy pull back when they had the upper hand? That question lingered like smoke in her mind as the team trudged across the rising heat of the desert. Their boots sank into soft sand, every step a reminder of exhaustion, every bead of sweat a tax they couldn't afford. Holt walked point, scanning through binoculars. Ramirez stumbled in the rear, pale but grinning, his injury slowing him but not silencing him. She stayed in the middle, silent as ever, eyes sweeping the horizon, watching, counting, waiting. The dunes gave nothing away. No sound but the crunch of boots, no movement but the shimmer of heat waves, and yet she knew they were there, shadows just beyond sight. The enemy hadn't retreated, they had repositioned. She could feel it. Why didn't they finish us? Ramirez muttered, dragging his good arm across his sweaty brow. They had numbers, they had firepower, should have been the end right there. Holt growled, don't question good fortune, kid, just keep moving. But it wasn't fortune, she knew that. It was calculation. She thought back to those prints in the sand, the patterns, the discipline. Whoever led them was playing a longer game. They weren't after a quick kill. They wanted something else. And part of her feared she knew what it was. The day dragged on. The sun beat down mercilessly, cooking the ground beneath their boots. They rationed water in silence, each sip more precious than gold. Flies buzzed around the bandages on the wounded. Holt's jaw stayed locked, his eyes scanning, always scanning. But even Holt missed it at first. She didn't. A scrap of cloth caught on a jagged rock. Tan fabric stained darker at the edges. She froze, lifted her fist, an unspoken signal. The team halted instantly. She crouched, studying the cloth. It wasn't theirs. It was fresh. A mark left by someone who wanted it found. A message. She swallowed hard, her throat dry not just from thirst. She knew this tactic. She had seen it before, years ago, on a street half a world away. The fighters had a way of pulling their prey where they wanted them, breadcrumb by breadcrumb, until the trap closed. She wanted to tell Holt, to explain how she knew. But to explain meant revealing the past she had buried, the past she had promised herself she'd never let surface. And so she stayed silent. Holt studied her, then the cloth, his eyes narrowed. What do you see? Her pulse quickened. Say nothing or tell the truth. Her mouth opened, but before words could form, Ramirez spoke up. It's bait, right? They want us to follow. Holt's head snapped toward him, then back to her. That what you think too? She hesitated. The truth itched at her throat. She forced out a single word. Yes. Holt grunted, spit into the sand, and motioned for the team to change direction. Then we don't give them what they want. We cut wide, swing east. Relief should have come. It didn't, because cutting wide wouldn't save them. Whoever was out there, they always planned for hesitation. And sure enough, half an hour later, the first shot cracked through the air. It wasn't aimed to kill. It was aimed to herd. A bullet struck the sand at Holt's feet, spraying grit into his eyes. He dropped, cursing. Another round slammed into a dune to their left, forcing them right. They weren't under attack. They were being steered. Her stomach twisted. She had seen this exact tactic before. Same precision, same intent. Ramirez shouted, "We're surrounded." She grabbed his collar, yanking him down before he made himself a target. Her voice was low, steady, carrying the weight of certainty. Not surrounded, controlled. He blinked at her, confused. What the hell does that mean? She didn't answer. She couldn't, not without unraveling everything. The team scrambled, firing back blindly, trying to break the invisible net tightening around them. Holt barked orders, his voice raw with strain. And in that chaos she saw him. For just a second. On the ridge outlined against the burning sky, a figure stood with binoculars. Calm, watching, not firing, directing. Her chest went hollow. She knew that silhouette. Years ago in that rain-soaked city he had been there. The other rooftop. The rival scope. The ghost who had vanished when her bullet found the wrong man. She had prayed she'd never see him again. But here he was. And if he was here, it meant the past wasn't done with her. Her breath came sharp, ragged. She steadied it, forced calm. Ramirez tugged at her sleeve, shouting over the chaos, "You see something? Tell me you see something." She lowered her rifle, heart hammering against ribs like a trapped animal. How could she explain? How could she tell them that this wasn't random, wasn't luck, wasn't just another enemy? This was personal. And if they stayed with her, if they followed her? The thought died in her throat as Holt's voice cut through. We break east, move now. They ran. Sand kicked up in blinding clouds. Bullets traced the air around them, close but never fatal. Always close enough to push, to guide, never enough to end it. Because that was his style. He didn't want them dead, not yet. He wanted her to know he was there. When the team finally collapsed behind a jagged outcrop of stone, lungs heaving, Holt slammed his fist against the rock. "They're toying with us." Ramirez leaned back, pale and sweating. "Who the hell are these guys?" No one answered. She stared at the ridge, at the place where that silhouette had vanished. And inside, she whispered the answer she couldn't give aloud. "They're my ghosts." The silence that followed was heavy. The desert stretched, endless and merciless, and though the team thought they had escaped, she knew the truth. They weren't running from the enemy. They were walking deeper into the story she had never told. And sooner or later, the past would demand its price. Why didn't she tell them the truth when she had the chance? That question gnawed at her as the heat of the day turned to the chill of desert night. The unit huddled against the jagged rocks, exhausted, dehydrated and fraying at the edges. Their bodies rested, but their nerves did not. The silence wasn't peace, it was a held breath. Ramirez lay stretched out, his wounded arm bandaged but throbbing. He tried to keep up the jokes, but his voice had thinned to a whisper. Holt cleaned his rifle with mechanical precision, jaw tight, mind working. The others shifted uneasily, waiting for dawn, waiting for orders, waiting for a break that wasn't coming. And she stood apart, watching the dunes, listening to the night, heart steady but mind a battlefield. Her scope swept the horizon, but she wasn't looking for targets. She was looking for him. The ghost on the ridge, the man from years ago, the one who had watched her fail and who had disappeared into the storm of her guilt. She could still see his face in memory, sharp, cold, with eyes that saw everything and revealed nothing. A rival sniper, a shadow with a name she had once whispered under her breath like a curse. Khalid. The first time she heard it, it was in a debrief room, whispered like a rumor among men who thought she wasn't listening. A phantom insurgent leader, trained in silence and patience, with eyes like glass and a mind like a knife. He had orchestrated ambushes that bled units dry without ever showing his hand. And in that city years ago, she had crossed his path. He had left with his life. She had left with blood on hers. Now he was here. And if he was here, it meant the fight wasn't just survival. It was unfinished business. Her throat burned as she swallowed the memory down. She couldn't tell them, not Holt, not Ramirez, not anyone. Because how could she admit that the man hunting them wasn't just some faceless enemy, but hers? A mistake she had carried across continents, a shadow she had never outrun. If she told them, everything she had built in silence would crumble. She would no longer be the quiet one who saw everything. She would be the one whose bullet had killed the wrong man, whose silence had damned a mission, whose ghost had come back to haunt them all. She couldn't risk it. So she said nothing. The night dragged, the cold seeped into their bones. Holt eventually set a rotation for watch. She volunteered again. No one questioned it. They trusted her eyes now, maybe even depended on them. She sat with her rifle propped on the rocks, the desert stretching endlessly ahead. The stars above burned cold, ancient, indifferent. And then she heard it. Not gunfire, not footsteps, something softer, a whistle, low, melodic, barely carried by the wind. Her skin prickled. She knew that sound. It was the same tune she had heard once before on a rooftop just before her mistake. Khalid's habit, his quiet taunt, a melody with no words, no anthem, just rhythm. Her heart clenched. He was close. She raised her rifle, scanning through the scope. At first, nothing, just dunes and shadows, then faintly a figure kneeling in the distance, not advancing, just waiting. Her finger tightened against the trigger. But then she froze. Because beside the figure, propped in the sand, was something else. A body, bound, gagged, still moving, still alive. Her chest tightened. Civilians weren't supposed to be here, and yet here one was, used as bait. Her breath caught. A memory slammed into her, the man in the city, falling from her bullet. The way his daughter had screamed in the street below, her cry sharper than any gunfire. She lowered the scope, her hands trembling. She couldn't take the shot, not like this, not with the risk. Her mind spiraled. If she stayed silent, the team might stumble into the trap. If she fired, she risked another innocent life. Her silence had once killed. Her hesitation might kill again. The weight of choice pressed on her chest until she thought it would break her ribs. Ramirez's voice cracked through the darkness. "Hey, you see something?" Her throat locked. She wanted to say no, to hide it, to carry it alone. But then she looked at him, young, hurt, still somehow smiling despite the pain, trusting her without question. Her silence couldn't protect him, not this time. "Yes," she whispered. The word felt like fire in her throat. Holt stirred awake, rifle already in his hands. "What?" She didn't answer. She just pointed through the scope, then handed it over. Holt squinted, cursed under his breath. "Son of a bitch." Ramirez frowned. "Who the hell ties a civilian out here?" Holt growled. "Someone who knows we'll try to save them." The truth hung in the air. They all knew it. It was bait. And yet, could they walk away? Could they leave an innocent behind, even knowing the trap it carried? The silence between them was heavier than any gunfire. Finally, Holt turned to her. "You saw it first. What do you think?" Her chest clenched. This was the moment. She could tell him everything, that the man behind this wasn't just an enemy, but her enemy. That this wasn't a random trap, but a personal war being waged across their footsteps. The words trembled on her tongue. But they didn't leave her lips. Instead, she said, "We can't leave them." Holt studied her for a long moment, then he nodded. "All right, we move at dawn, quiet, fast, in and out." Ramirez muttered, "In and out never goes the way it's supposed to." No one argued. The plan was set, the decision made. But as she cleaned her rifle and checked her gear, her hands shook, not from fear of the mission, but from the truth she hadn't spoken. She had just led them deeper into Khalid's game. And she knew exactly how it would end if she couldn't find the courage to finally break her silence. Why does dawn always feel sharper before blood is spilled? The sky was pale gray when they moved, the kind of light that made every shadow uncertain, every dune deceptive. She led the way this time, not because Holt ordered it, but because his silence had seeded it. After last night, after spotting the civilian, no one questioned her eyes anymore. But trust was a blade that cut both ways. Her boots sank into cold sand, rifle cradled tight, eyes scanning the ridge where the figure had knelt hours before. She kept thinking of the whistle, that low melody Khalid used to announce himself without ever showing his face. She knew he was watching. She could feel it, like pressure against her skin. The bound figure appeared as they crested a dune, a man slumped, tied to a post dug into the sand. His head jerked weakly when they approached, eyes swollen, lips cracked, still alive. Ramirez whispered, "Jesus." Holt raised his hand. The unit froze, the silence pressed down. They all knew what this could be. Her heart thudded. This was the moment. This was Khalid's stage. She swept her scope across the horizon. Dunes, rocks, nothing obvious, but she knew better. He was here. He was always here. Holt's voice was low, measured. "Options." She wanted to say it's a trap. She wanted to say he's here because of me. Instead, she said, "Cover arcs, 2 approach, keep it clean." Holt nodded, considering, then pointed. "Ramirez, you stay, you're wounded. Lee, you're with me." Her stomach dropped. If anyone should approach, it should be her. She knew Khalid's patterns, his tricks. She could read the ground in ways Holt never could. But speaking up meant explaining why. And explaining why meant opening the wound she had kept sealed for years. Her silence betrayed her. She watched Holt and Lee move, slow and careful, rifles up, eyes scanning. The civilian groaned, pulling weakly against his bindings. Every muscle in her body screamed. She adjusted her scope again. And there it was. Barely a shimmer, a piece of glass tucked against a dune, a scope watching them. Her throat tightened. She had seconds. Her breath steadied. The world narrowed to her rifle, her heartbeat, her target. She squeezed. The glass shattered. A rifle jerked upward as its owner fell back into the sand. Gunfire exploded around them. Holt cursed, dragging the civilian down with him as rounds tore through the post. Lee went flat, firing wild into the dunes. Ramirez yelled something she didn't catch. She was already firing, breath sinking with the rhythm of her shots. 1, 2, 3, each body falling, each movement precise. But she knew this wasn't the main strike. Khalid never showed his full hand first. And then it happened. A round cracked against the rock inches from her cheek, spraying grit into her eyes. Too close, too deliberate. She knew that shot. It wasn't meant to kill. It was meant to tell her, I see you. Her stomach twisted. Another round sang past Holt, close enough to shave his helmet. Another past Ramirez, snapping the sand just near his leg. Controlled fire, hurting shots. Her gut turned to ice. Khalid wasn't trying to kill them. He was pulling them apart, isolating them. The civilian cried out as Holt dragged him toward cover. Lee shouted something about ammo. Ramirez fired until his clip went dry, fumbling with shaking hands. And she stayed locked on the dunes, waiting for the shot that would come next. And then she saw him. Not a silhouette this time, not a ghost on a ridge, but him. Khalid. He stood for just a heartbeat, rifle steady, face shadowed by a scarf. But she knew those eyes, cold, patient, unflinching. Her finger froze on the trigger. It was her chance, her clean shot. And she couldn't take it. Her hands trembled. The memory surged, her bullet tearing into the wrong man, the scream of a child below, her breath locked. She couldn't risk another mistake. Her hesitation lasted seconds, but seconds were everything. By the time she steadied herself, he was gone. The firefight dwindled. The attackers melted back into the dunes, as disciplined as they had arrived. Silence returned, heavy and cruel. Holt dragged the civilian the rest of the way into cover, dropped him with a grunt and turned on her. His eyes burned. You had him. Her chest clenched. She had no defense, no words. Ramirez looked between them, confused. Had who? Holt spat into the sand. Don't play dumb. You saw him, didn't you? Her silence said everything. The team stared, waiting. And for the first time, she felt the wall of her silence closing in. If she didn't speak now, they would lose faith. If she did, she risked unraveling everything. Her lips parted, the truth trembled there. But all she said was, it wasn't clean. Holt's jaw tightened. His stare lingered, sharp and heavy, before he turned away. The weight in her chest doubled. The civilian groaned, drawing their attention back. Holt knelt, cutting bindings, checking for wounds. The man's eyes darted wildly, terrified. He spoke in broken words none of them fully understood. But she understood. Because buried in his ramble was a name. Khalid. Her pulse spiked. She stepped closer, crouching, listening. The man's cracked lips repeated it, Khalid, Khalid, over and over like a warning. Her blood went cold. Holt glanced up at her. He knows something. She forced her face still, her voice flat. He knows the name. Ramirez frowned. Whose name? Her silence lasted too long. Holt's eyes narrowed. And in that moment she knew. She couldn't outrun it any longer. The truth was bleeding through, whether she spoke it or not. And when it finally came out, it would change everything. What do you do when the ghosts you carry suddenly step into daylight? The captured man's voice was cracked, fevered, barely human from thirst and fear. But the word that kept tumbling out of his mouth was unmistakable. Khalid. The sound of it was enough to drag her back years, to dirt roads, to smoke-choked skis, to a single shot that rewrote her entire life. Ramirez tilted his head, frowning. He keeps saying the same name. Is that the guy running this? Holt's eyes didn't leave her. His jaw flexed tight, measured. Yeah, it is. His voice was flat but heavy, like he just dropped a stone between them. The others didn't notice the weight in his tone, but she did. He wasn't just hearing the name. He was waiting for her to flinch. And she did. Her breath caught just enough to betray her. Holt's eyes sharpened. She looked away, but too late. The silence had already spoken for her. They pulled back before noon, moving into a dried-out wadi for cover. The civilian drank water in desperate gulps, coughing between sips. He was too weak to say more than fragments, but every fragment contained the name. Khalid, Khalid, Khalid. The word became a drumbeat in her head. She tried to focus on the terrain, the way the shadows fell across the ravine walls, the shifting wind carrying sand like whispers. But the harder she tried, the louder the name became, until it was the only sound she could hear. Her silence was cracking. That evening, as the light bled into rust-colored dusk, Holt finally cornered her. The others were tending to the civilian, checking supplies, trying to plan for the next move. But Holt pulled her away, up the slope of the wadi, out of earshot. His face was unreadable in the dying light. Talk. Her throat was dry. About what? He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a low growl. Don't play me. You had the shot today. You froze. You saw him, didn't you? Her chest tightened. She wanted to deflect, to hide behind silence again, but his eyes pinned her in place. Finally she whispered, yes. The word was so soft it barely left her lips, but it was enough. Holt's jaw clenched. Then why didn't you take it? She looked past him, toward the horizon where the desert swallowed the sun. Because it wasn't clean. Bullshit, Holt snapped. You've taken dirtier shots 100 times. That wasn't hesitation, that was something else. He leaned in, his voice a knife. Who is he? Her heart pounded. She felt the past pressing against her ribs, begging to be spoken. But saying it out loud would mean admitting what she had buried, what she had carried alone all these years. Her lips parted, the words trembled. And then Holt whispered the one thing that broke her silence. He's not just an enemy to you, is he? Her chest seized, her legs felt hollow, and before she could stop herself, the truth spilled out. He was mine. The words hung between them like a blade. Holt blinked. What? Her voice cracked. My target, my mission, my mistake. The memory surged, raw and merciless. Years ago, a mission in a village split by violence. Khalid was a name in a file, a shadow moving between houses, a ghost whispered about by locals. She had been the one on the trigger, the one with the vantage, the one ordered to take him out. And she had fired. But her bullet had missed, not by much, but enough. Instead, it struck another man, not Khalid, an ally, a father, someone who wasn't meant to die. The chaos that followed had been unstoppable. A firefight, children screaming, her team pulling her out while she stared at the body in the dirt. Khalid escaped. And from that day forward, every time she heard his name, she felt the weight of that single round. He was her ghost because she had made him one. Holt's face was stone, but his eyes burned. You mean to tell me all this time, this mission was personal? Her hands shook. I didn't choose it, they sent me. I didn't tell them and I didn't tell you, because if I did, you'd pull me out, and I couldn't. Holt cut her off. You couldn't risk what? Facing him, or admitting to us that you've been lying this whole time. The words hit harder than any bullet. She felt them hollow her out. She swallowed. Her voice was barely a whisper. I couldn't let him keep winning. For the first time, Holt's mask cracked. His anger faltered, replaced by something else, weariness maybe, or recognition. He stepped back, looking at her like she was both a soldier and a stranger. You should have told me. She said nothing, she couldn't. His silence lasted a long time, broken only by the wind carrying sand between them. Finally, he exhaled. "We'll deal with it later. For now, you're still our best chance of finding him. Don't make me regret keeping you here." And with that, he turned and walked back down the slope, leaving her alone with her ghosts. That night she didn't sleep. The stars were cruel in their clarity, bright against the black sky. Every sound of shifting sand, every whisper of wind felt like Khalid's presence pressing closer. Her rifle rested across her lap, but her hands trembled too much to hold it steady. She thought of Khalid's eyes in the scope today, the calm way he had looked at her before disappearing. He knew, he remembered. And worse, he wanted her to remember. Because this wasn't just war anymore. This was unfinished business. When dawn came, Holt gave the order. "We move. East Ridge. Intel says Khalid's cell has been shifting that direction. If the prisoner's rambling is worth anything, that's where he'll be." The team packed in silence. Ramirez avoided her eyes. Lee muttered under his breath, but never loud enough to reach her. Only Holt's stare lingered, cold and sharp, reminding her that her truth was now a weapon in someone else's hands. They moved into the rising sun, boots crunching on hardpan, rifles catching the light. And with every step, she felt the weight pressing heavier on her chest. Because this wasn't just about the mission anymore. This was about whether she could finally take the shot. And if she missed again, this time, it wouldn't just be one life shattered. It would be all of them. What if the enemy knows you better than your own? The thought clung to her as they climbed the eastern ridge, boots crunching over stone, the sun glaring down mercilessly. She could taste the salt of sweat, feel the burn in her legs, but worse than all of it was the sense that every step forward was one he had chosen for them. Khalid. Her ghost. Her mistake. She kept her eyes on the horizon, scanning, searching, but in truth she was already caught. This wasn't reconnaissance anymore. It was a trail designed for her. Halfway up the ridge, Holt raised his fist. The squad froze. A glint in the sand, barely visible, but she saw it instantly. Wire. IED. She dropped to one knee, heart hammering. "Stop," she hissed, voice sharper than she intended. Ramirez froze mid-step. His boot hovered just inches above the wire. Sweat streamed down his temple as his eyes darted to hers. "Don't move." She crawled forward, the heat searing her palms through her gloves. Slowly, carefully, she brushed the sand aside, exposing the device. A crude but deadly trap. Ramirez swallowed hard. That would have been it. Her throat tightened. That was the point. They disarmed it together, hands trembling, every second a countdown that stretched eternity thin. When the detonator finally clicked safe, Ramirez exhaled in a shudder. His eyes met hers. For the first time there was no joking in them, only gratitude and fear. Why did he know we'd come this way? She didn't answer, couldn't. Because she already knew. This wasn't meant for them, it was meant for her. By late afternoon, they reached the plateau. Wind whipped across the open ground, carrying sand like shards. The land stretched wide, barren, a stage set by someone who knew exactly where every line would fall. The silence was wrong, too complete, too deliberate. Lee muttered, "Feels like we're being watched." They were. She felt it in her bones, in the way the hair on her neck prickled, in the way her pulse synced with the invisible beat of a scope. Holt's voice was low, "Stay tight, eyes up." They moved a cautious circle, weapons scanning, but no enemy came, only echoes of their own movements. Until a voice. Calm, confident, drifting from nowhere and everywhere all at once. Too slow. The sound froze her blood. The others spun, searching for the source, but she already knew. Khalid. His voice carried across the plateau, smooth as glass, poisoned with memory. "You always were too slow." Her chest tightened. She remembered his face in her scope years ago, the moment she had fired, the way he had vanished into chaos while another man fell. Now he was here speaking, alive. Ramirez's voice cracked. Where the hell is he? The echo made it impossible to tell. It bounced off rock, off silence, weaving around them like a noose. And then Khalid laughed, not loud, not mocking, just soft, like he was speaking to her alone. I thought you would come. I left you a trail. You followed like always. Her grip tightened on her rifle. Her silence felt like glass, ready to shatter. Holt's eyes snapped to her, sharp, accusing. He knows you. The first shot came out of nowhere. A crack that split the air, sparking stone inches from Lee's head. The squad dove for cover, scattering across the plateau. Dust filled the air. More shots, controlled, precise. Not wild ambush fire, this was surgical. Ramirez pressed his back against a rock, breathing hard. He's playing with us. And he was. Every shot hurted them, drove them exactly where Khalid wanted. She knew it, she felt it. Because this wasn't a firefight, it was a conversation. Another shot rang out, closer this time, chipping stone near her knee. She didn't flinch. Her eyes scanned the ridgeline, searching for the flicker of glass, the shadow of movement. And then she saw it. The faintest silhouette. Not aiming at Ramirez, not Holt, not Lee. At her. Always at her. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She raised her rifle, sights locking on the shimmer of his position. And for a single breath, time folded. She saw him as he had been years ago, the ghost in her scope, the man who had walked away while another lay still. Her finger tightened. But the doubt roared back. What if I miss again? What if I take another life that isn't his? Her breath stuttered. Her hands shook. The ghost whispered, louder than the wind, louder than Holt's shouted orders, louder than the gunfire pinning her squad down. Her silence was crumbling. She lowered the rifle. Why aren't you shooting? Holt's voice tore across the chaos, raw, furious. You see him, I know you see him. She couldn't speak. The words caught in her throat, strangled by years of guilt. And then Khalid's voice, softer than the storm of bullets. Do you remember his face, the one you killed instead of me? Her chest caved, her lungs seized. Ramirez's voice panicked, desperate. Who the hell is this guy? But she couldn't answer, not here, not like this. Because this wasn't just a battle. It was her judgment. The gunfire slowed. The echoes faded, as if Khalid wanted the silence to be louder than the bullets. Then his voice again, calm, patient. You're not here for them, you're here for me, so let them go. Come find me, alone. Every muscle in her body locked. The squad exchanged looks, confusion bleeding into fear. Holt's eyes cut to her, burning, demanding truth. Because they all knew now. This wasn't just his war, it was hers. She stayed frozen, the rifle heavy in her hands, her silence finally suffocating. Because the battlefield was no longer the plateau. It was her own chest. Her heart was the target, her past was the weapon. And Khalid was pulling the trigger. What do you say to a ghost when he finally stands before you? She walked away from the squad, rifle low but ready, boots sinking into the dust. Behind her, Holt's voice barked once sharp, commanding, but it trailed into silence when he realized she wasn't stopping. Because this was no longer their fight. This was hers. The plateau fell away into a narrow ravine, shadows stretching long across its floor. And there he was. Khalid. Not in her scope, not in memory, in front of her, real, flesh and bone. His rifle dangled casually at his side, not raised, not threatening. His eyes fixed on her with a calm that cut deeper than rage. I knew you'd come, he said softly. You've been chasing me for years, or perhaps I've been chasing you. Her throat tightened, words sat like stones on her tongue. He tilted his head, studying her. Do you still see him, the man you killed instead of me? The memory slammed into her: dust, screams, the lifeless eyes of the man who should have lived. She blinked hard, but the image didn't fade. Khalid smiled faintly, but it wasn't joy. It was cruelty dressed as kindness. I see him too. Every time I close my eyes, he walks with me, just as he walks with you. Her silence was breaking, splintering. Finally she whispered, "It was my fault." The words shook, but they were out. The truth she had buried dragged into daylight. Khalid stepped closer, slow, deliberate. "Yes, and that is why you cannot kill me, because if you do, you will see his face again, not mine." Her hands trembled on the rifle. For years she had hidden inside silence, hoping it would bury the mistake. But silence had only fed the ghost. Now the ghost was here, wearing Khalid's shadow. Her breath steadied, slowly, sharply. She raised the rifle. Khalid's smile didn't fade. "Go on then, take your shot, see who you really kill this time." Her finger pressed the trigger. For a moment doubt screamed, but beneath it another voice, softer, older, rose: Ramirez's laugh, Holt's weary trust, even her father's harsh lessons. And something else. Her own. Not the silence, not the guilt, the voice she had buried under it all. This is not about erasing the past, it's about ending it. Her finger tightened. The shot cracked. Khalid fell. Dust rose, silence followed. But this silence was different, not the silence of shame, not the silence of fear. This one felt like release. When she returned to the squad, their eyes were heavy with questions. Holt stared at her for a long time, as if measuring whether she was soldier or stranger. Ramirez opened his mouth, then closed it again, like the words wouldn't come. She didn't explain, she didn't defend. She simply set her rifle down and said the only words that mattered. "It's done." No one argued. They moved out together, boots crunching in rhythm, carrying the weight of both survival and loss. But something inside her had shifted. The ghosts would never vanish. The man she killed by mistake would always walk beside her. But now she could face him, not in silence, not in shame, but with the dignity of someone who had carried her burden and acted anyway. On the last night before extraction, as the desert stars burned cruel and bright, Holt finally spoke to her. "You didn't just kill him for us," he said quietly. "You killed him for yourself." She didn't answer, she didn't need to. Because he was right. The silence between them was no longer suffocating. It was simply space, room to breathe. When dawn broke, they boarded the bird home. Engines roared, dust swirled, and the desert shrank beneath them. She leaned back against the metal hull, eyes closed. For the first time in years, the rhythm of her heartbeat didn't sound like a battlefield. It sounded like survival. Sometimes redemption doesn't arrive with fanfare. Sometimes there is no flag, no anthem, only silence. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.